I want to talk a little bit about what you do if you're working next to an asbestos project. So how do I know there's an asbestos project next to me? Well, first of all, there's supposed to be signs, danger signs that say don't come in here, and barrier tape or a containment that delineates the regulated area. Your employer should have received a notification about any project in the vicinity of his or her employees. And so that communication should have come and maybe filtered down to you. However, if the asbestos work is going on in violation of regulations, then you've got a problem. And you would talk to your employer and have your employer at that point talk to the building owner, who would be responsible for NESHAP compliance, depending on the scale, and could have criminal liability. So it would be a good thing if there was an illegal project going on to notify the owner. So the second question is, once I know that there's a project, how do I know that I'm safe? And the first way that you know is that there's an inter-employer notification that was supposed to occur before the project started. In that inter-employer notification, your employer was told how the employer doing the asbestos work was going to protect you. That gives you some indication of the engineering controls and work practices that will keep you from asbestos exposure. Secondly, your employer, under paragraph D of 1926-1101, is responsible for taking steps on a daily basis to make sure that you are protected. Now, those steps could be as simple as observing the engineering controls or reviewing some air monitoring results outside containment that show that there are no asbestos fibers being released from the project. The problem is that some of the monitoring that I just mentioned is not always required. It may be part of a specification, but there are very few places in the country where it's required by regulations, and at the federal level, it is not required. Another thing you could do is observe the cleanliness of the workers doing the asbestos work, the engineering controls, and particularly how they're doing waste handling. Do you see any indication that you're being exposed because of their sloppy work practices? And again, go back to what I said earlier. Report it to your owner, to your employer, so that they can report it to the facility owner. Now, in the rare case that you're a person called onto a job site and you have to access the work area, what do? First of all, you need to know how to protect yourself, and you need to be trained in respiratory protection. You need to have at least some asbestos awareness. In some states, you need to have an asbestos license, asbestos credential to enter into a work area. If you're coming in after the job is completed, you should be able to know that there's been a final clearance sample or a final visual inspection, something to indicate that the job is completed. In different states and different kinds of buildings have different rules as far as what that something is, but there should be some kind of completion documentation. In an emergency, if you're working next to an asbestos job, if there's a failure of their containment, some kind of fiber release episode, your responsibility is to vacate the area. OSHA is clear in 1926-1101 paragraph D that your employer is responsible to get you out of that space until the space has been verified to be clean. The only exception potentially could be if there's a life-threatening emergency, because the nature of asbestos risk is that it causes diseases that show up 20 to 30 years on the average after the first exposure. And so if there's a life-threatening situation, obviously that would take priority. And if you have a responsibility in that emergency response to the life-saving situation, then that would take precedence over the asbestos exposure.